Only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Adding Depth and Defense in Your Customer's Office 365 Deployment. I'm Sarah Duffy, Marketing Manager here at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. Today, I am joined by Mike Parkin, Technical Marketing Engineer here at Barracuda. Mike will be discussing what Office 365's native security can and cannot do, and how easily you can provide the in-depth security for your customers. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over some brief housekeeping. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the questions panel on the right of the GoToWebinar screen. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to today's presenter. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Mike Parkin. I'm a technical marketing engineer here at Barracuda. My purview is basically all things email. My focus is on the Essentials product line and all the things related to it. I am not broadcasting from my usual sound booth today. I've got a beautiful sound booth downstairs, but unfortunately was usurped by somebody else doing a webcast. So you might hear a little bit of background noise because I'm not in my usual spot. In any case, today we're going to go over defense in depth for Office 365. A little bit, we're going to kind of start out as why people have moved to the cloud, why Office 365 is the powerhouse that it is, and how we at Barracuda can help you protect yourself even with the defenses that Office 365 includes. So let me get started here. And with questions, by the way, I will be monitoring the questions window. If I can take them in stride, I will. Otherwise, I'll probably save them till the end and just take them when they're most effective. In any case, most of you are probably familiar with Office 365. You're either there or you're planning to go yourself. It's a huge thing, right? Everybody knows about Office 365. It's a huge push from Microsoft's behalf. They introduced it in 2011. And it is currently really the 800-pound gorilla of the Office productivity services software world. And many of you are already there, right? That's why you're here. Either that or you're going to be going in the near term, and that's why you're working with us, looking for a little bit of advice, or going to be working with our MSP to get across there. So the real question is, why has Office become the powerhouse that it is? Why has everyone been making this move from the old days where we would buy Windows, you'd buy Windows, you'd buy Office, you'd install it, go. Why have they moved everything to the cloud? And there's multiple answers to that, multiple pieces to it. Microsoft has done a really, really good job with Office 365. It's very cost effective. Some would say over the long term it may be more expensive than buying Office, but at the same time, you're getting constant updates. You always have the most recent version. You can always download it, and then when you get an Office 365 license, you can have it installed, the actual app installed in multiple locations, and then you've got the web app. It's eminently scalable. It's fantastic as far as that goes. My own system I use here for testing and for my own demonstration, my own research, is a single Office 365 instance, right? Single user. I manage it myself. It's me. But it scales up dramatically. I was on a webinar that Microsoft was doing, and they had some co-presenters from General Electric. GE at the time was saying they had 300,000 users on Office 365. Exact same platform. So it's just wildly scalable from the tiniest organizations up to the most massive enterprise. You use the same capability. Management is relatively straightforward and simplified. You've got your UI to get in to manage basically the single pane of glass that you're going to manage Office 365 from. We'll talk about that a little bit more later because there are actually a few challenges associated with how they do what they do. They do a good job, but there's some challenges I want to touch on. And then there's cross-platform versatility, which is, I don't know if it's unparalleled, but it's very definitely one of the most versatile platforms out there. Obviously, it runs native Windows. Many of you, I'm sure, are on this webinar from a Windows computer. It runs just as well, if not better, on a Mac. When I came here to Barracuda, I actually got my first Macintosh. I've got a MacBook Pro here that I use at work. And it was my first Mac, and I was actually really impressed with how well Microsoft Office worked on the Mac. Historically, I've been a Linux guy. And then you've got, it works natively, obviously on Windows, on Mac. It works natively on iOS devices. It works natively on Android devices. And if you're an old school guy or just kind of off the wall person, you're using BSD on a, using a web browser on BSD, it works in a web. So you've got the web UI, you've got Office Online, you've got OWA. You can actually use Office on pretty much anything. If you've got a browser, you can use it. Which I think, personally, I think is pretty amazing. I think it's a really cool capability they've added. So what about security? What has Microsoft done in the security world here? So they've done a really good job of securing infrastructure that Office 365 runs on top of. Their data centers are really, really impressive. I've been in the security industry for quite a few years. I started out in IT many years ago. I was in security operations for a big hardware company. I was at the Federal Reserve for a number of years doing penetration testing and vulnerability research. And during my time there, I had the opportunity to actually try to hack into quite a number of large banks. And Microsoft's physical security, aside from the armed police officers that we had, is really on par with anyone. They have physical layers of protection. They have procedural layers of protection that keeps your data safe and keeps the infrastructure safe. But here's the rub here. Their systems and their processes are designed primarily to protect the infrastructure that it's running on top of. What they do to protect you and your data, that's a different animal. And they include two different solutions. Okay, they've got Exchange Online Protection, which is included, and then their Advanced Threat Protection stack, which is included at the highest level. If you've got an E5 account, they include ATP. Otherwise, you have to buy it as a separate subscription. So EOP is their basics. Okay, it includes their spam filtering, their antivirus, and their anti-malware. It's technically very, very similar to Windows Defender on their antivirus, anti-malware capability. If you have a Windows system, you have Windows Defender, comes with by default. And then there's spam filtering capability that you're all aware of, right? You've seen the junk mail folder for years if you've been using Exchange or Exchange Online. You're well familiar with that. But that's what they include in Office 365. Their threat protection capability adds some additional capabilities, which are actually pretty cool. The protection from advanced threats and 0 days. They add some heuristics, and they add some sandboxing capabilities, and they add their version of link protection. Now, ATP from Microsoft is an added cost subscription. So if you have an E1 or an E3, or the most basic version where you're just grabbing the email, you actually end up having to pay extra for the ATP protection. ATP is included with the most advanced E5 scenario. And that's kind of targeted towards the enterprise customers, et cetera. It's not so much targeted to the small, medium business users. Certainly not the single proprietor shops like I have set up here at the office. So the question is, with ATP and EOP, it really looks like they've got you covered. So you'd have to ask yourself, if they're got us covered, why would you want to go? Why would you want to add Barracuda? And that's actually a good question. So let me elaborate on that. Let me kind of explain why you want to add layers of defense on top of what Microsoft is going to give you already. So the first step of this is defense in depth. This is one of the things that anyone who's actually a security professional will tell you, that if you have the opportunity to add additional layers of defense, do so. It's the thing to do. It's been a best practice for quite a few years. Will probably remain a best practice as long as people are trying to do bad things to other people with computers. Defense in depth will remain a good practice, and it's something that's just always been recommended. Something, again, I came out of security operations and done pen testing, and I know from experience that I've had cases where I was able to compromise someone's workstation or laptop and was able to work around, or it was a server, and I couldn't go any further. because there were actual additional layers of defense in the stack that were keeping me from leveraging that compromise to get any further. And of course, having the extra layers up front, the nice thing about that is I have, it's not just a simple 1 + 1 = 2. In the layers of defense world, it's 1 + 1 = somewhere between 2 and 5, depending on how the layers stack up. So it's definitely to your advantage to have multiple layers. Going with multiple vendors, there's actually some advantages to that. You don't want to get a different vendor for every single component, because now you've got the logistical complication, and trying to keep track of when licenses expire and who your contacts are for everything. But if you can narrow it down to only a couple of vendors, it's very helpful. I mean, there's the advantage the single vendor is only one person to blame when things go wrong, but there's the problem that if something goes wrong with them, they're going to be the point of failure. And all of us, we have different strengths and different weaknesses. Different things we do better than they do, different things they do better than we do, and that's can be said for anybody in the industry. So by working with more than one vendor, you have the ability technically that they complement each other and compromise for each other's weaknesses, even unintentionally. We don't necessarily design to say, oh, Windows doesn't do this as well. We'll write something that says specifically to fix that. We do what we do to do the best we can, and they do what they do to do the best we can. We take different approaches, and those approaches end up helping out, which leads to the fact of using multiple defensive techniques. So Microsoft has a different paradigms on how they do things than we do. If you've looked at, obviously, if you're a Windows user, you're used to Windows Defender, you've seen it, and in many cases, people say Windows Defender, it's all I need, no problem. But if you've got, say, Windows Defender and Avast or Kaspersky or ClamAV or any of the other antivirus, anti-malware tools, you'll occasionally run into cases where Microsoft missed something and the other guys caught it. And that's one of the biggest advantages to having the multiple lines of defense, the multiple defensive techniques. Because as an attacker, I'm going to go against Microsoft. I know I'm going to go against Microsoft, right? That's the thing, right? Everybody's going to have, everybody's going to have Windows Defender. Everybody's going to have EOP if they're an Office 365 house. Fact. So as an attacker, that's what I'm going to test against. So something that's actually designed specifically to go against EOP's weakness is very likely to be caught by something else. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So even without considering just the defense in depth capability, are there any security challenges that you really need to think about when you're working with Office 365? And there are a couple of things. I mentioned, their comprehensive user interface being a strength, and it is from an administration standpoint. But particularly on the security side, it can be a complicated interface. There's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot of bells and whistles and knobs and buttons to click on and change and modify and tweak. And to get to the security stuff you need can actually be a real challenge. I've been using O365 for a while now, and I will occasionally find things like, where did I leave that command? So it can be fairly difficult to find everything you need. There's some specific spam filtering issues that we've all seen. Microsoft will occasionally completely fail to block spam. Now, this applies to everybody. I'm sure most, if not all of you, have a Gmail account of your own. If it's not for work, it's private. And you'll find that most of the spam ends up in the spam folder, and every once in a while you'll get something that's like, wait, why did that get through? And that's one of the challenges, is that spammers, separate from malware writers, but spammers and malware writers too, are always trying to get their payload to you. Now, for a malware writer, it's going to be something malicious, right? It's going to be bad link, bad code, etc. If it's a spammer, they want to get their advertisement onto your desk. So they're always trying to figure out how to get around those filters. So even a couple of percentage points or tenths of a percentage point can make a huge difference when you're dealing with, 1,000 spam emails a day, 10,000 spam emails a day. Next step is their ATP. While pretty effective, we've had a number of reports of things taking 5, 10, 20 minutes, half an hour even, for things to go processing. 5 minutes usually isn't a big deal, but when you start getting 15, 20 minutes, that can be a problem. We have a dynamic delivery feature, which is cool, but can be frustrating because what it will do, the email will come through and say, hey, there's an attachment to this email that I'm processing, and as soon as I'm done processing that attachment, I'll send it to you. So you end up waiting for that attachment to come in. Sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's quite a bit longer. And then, as I mentioned before, is Microsoft is the 800-pound gorilla. They are the one line of defense that everybody is guaranteed to have. And they're the one line of defense everybody's going to attack and try to get around. And from that perspective, I went out and got an account to be able to do my own testing. And I actually occasionally will test spam email against it. I'll test custom malware against it, etc., to see if it gets through to my own inbox. Any attacker can do that and will do that. So it's a thing to do, right? If you're in the game of attacking people, you're going to want to test against the thing they're going to be defending with. So there's that challenge. And they've occasionally had issues where they've had things that have been specifically targeted to do that defense in depth was really the only way you could manage to survive it. So a couple of things we haven't even talked about yet is having offsite backups in case of a breach. And not even just a breach, but what happens if somebody accidentally deletes a bunch of files that you really wished they hadn't? You can recover them. That could be a bit of a challenge. And if you're in financial world, if you're in legal world, if you're in medical care, healthcare somewhere, archiving, how you handle email can actually be some major regulatory compliance issues there. Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, etc. There's a lot of places where how you handle your email, how you handle your archives, it comes into play. And Microsoft has some archiving capability, but in a lot of cases, it simply doesn't meet the needs unless you start adding a bunch of functionality on top of it. So what pieces are missing, right? We've looked at the email protection puzzle and realized that there is more to Office 365 than you might think. There is more than the obvious pieces to complete this whole security picture. So here at Barracuda, we take a three-step approach to how we enhance Microsoft's capabilities and how we enhance security in general. We can protect not just Microsoft, obviously, but we're focusing here on Office 365. So how do we stop attackers from getting through to your Office 365 environment? So the first step we look at is the ability to detect latent threats. A lot of people see detect and think, oh, this is detecting things that are coming in. In this case, we're actually talking about detecting latent threats, things that may already exist in your environment. We then talk about prevention. Prevention is the detecting things as they're coming in. So this is where we prevent the attackers from getting past your perimeter, getting inside your organization and being able to do any damage. And finally, the last piece of it is recovery. And this is where backup comes into play. And email archiving, you could actually count here too as a point of recovery. And I'll actually talk about that a little bit when I talk about the archiver in a few minutes. And we're really uniquely positioned to fill out protection for Office 365. We have a full portfolio of capabilities that help you leverage Microsoft's native security and add the additional layers to keep you safe. We fill in the gaps. We do that the way no one else can with Essentials and a couple of other products that are tied directly to Essentials that I'm going to talk to here at the end. So the first step of this I'm going to talk about is the detection side. I've got a couple of tools here I'm going to kind of look at. So the first one is the email threat scanner for Office 365. This is an ability to scan Exchange Online email boxes for existing threats. You can work with us directly. You can work with our colleagues over at the MSP office. They'll be more than happy to work with you on this to basically lets you run a scan of your environment to see what's already there, what may have gotten in. So if you've been on Office 365 for a while and haven't had additional protection in place, you may have had things get in that you weren't even really aware of. It's cloud-based, it's free to run. This is what it looks like when you run it, give you the scan, gives you a report, shows the different emails, the different things that you've seen, then individual threats it may have discovered. And then, as I showed originally, this report that shows you what it's all going. This is just a glimpse of what this looks like for Office 365. We also have it for Exchange. If you haven't made the move to Office 365 yet, or if you're running a hybrid environment where you still have your Exchange server, you've made the move, but you still have some Exchange servers in play, this actually lets you scan your Office 3 or Exchange on physical Exchange environment. It's a little bit different from how the scanner-free Exchange Exchange Online works, in that this runs, it's not web-based entirely. It runs on your desktop. It leverages what you've got locally. So you've got an Outlook instance, you download the program, you run the program, and it goes into your Exchange environment and actually looks through Exchange files to see what's going on there. Oops. So here's really the meat of it. This is what we came to talk about in Essentials, Barracuda Essentials, and how we prevent attacks from getting into your environment, how we add to Microsoft security to make the world a safer place for you. So Barracuda built our reputation originally on our spam firewall quite a few years ago when we came onto the market. And we've just kept improving on it since. This is built on our world-class spam filtering platform, and as I mentioned with Microsoft, spammers are always trying to get ahead. So occasionally they'll get ahead for a couple hours, and we realize there's a new campaign, and they've come up with a new technique, and we adapt to it or start filtering it very shortly thereafter. And we've been consistently rated for very, very high spam filtering efficacy, and we have always been shown to have really world-class customer support. If you actually start looking at reviews online, our support has been very, very highly praised and has been award-winning. We add in there is anti-phishing protection. We include a link protection capability in every single one of our products. It's not an added cost. It's something that we always include. And link protection is actually a pretty cool feature. What it does is it's there to rewrite links in email that may be hostile and send you to a malware site or spam or any one of a number of other things. And it rewrites it to go to a service that redirects you. If the site is okay, it redirects you to a good site. If the site is bad, it redirects you to a warning. Let me show you what that looks like. So if you get an email, there's a link in this email that I'm going to follow the link, and that's a bad link. It pops up and shows me there's a security warning. One of the things that's actually cool about this is down here, if you see there's that, learn how to detect and prevent future phishing attacks. Actually have some online training that can help you understand how these phishing attacks work and how to stop them. So we have the ability to stop. We scan attachments. We have AV service that comes in and stops stops the viruses from getting through. Anti-malware capability, and then on top of that, we have the advanced threat protection capability. At one time, this was optional. Late last year, we basically had the realization that this should not be an optional service. So we basically dropped our very bottom offering that didn't have it and said, we're going to include this with everything. So now you get our advanced threat protection capability when it comes in. And ATP is actually really cool. It's a multi-layer defense, which starts out with determining whether something is bad to begin with and going from there. Then drops in and does a series of heuristic analysis where it basically tears apart the code, looks how the code goes together, and makes a determination on how the code is built, whether it's likely to be malware or not. I could probably do an hour to an hour and a half presentation just on doing the heuristic analysis. And then the final step is going to a CPU emulated sandbox. And again, sandboxing is something I could probably do easily an hour on how sandboxing works. As a momentary view, there's the two main ways to do sandboxing is virtual machine or CPU emulation. A virtual machine, they've been around for probably 10, 12 years at least, maybe 15 by this point. And what they do is they spool up a virtual machine, drop the file in, and see what it does. The thing is, malware can be written in such a way to understand that it's running in a virtual environment and will behave differently if it's in a virtual environment to make itself look more benign. What CPU emulation does is makes it look like it's a real environment. It does everything from, hides the fact that it's running on an emulated CPU. It looks like a real CPU to the software. It looks like there's mouse clicks and things moving around on the desktop. There's audio going, there's video going, there's all these things going on to make it look like you're on an actual desktop, designed to fool the malware into thinking it's in a real environment and running from there. Advantage and disadvantage to both. Not going to go into it in any more depth because there's so much depth that I could go into. But we've chosen to go with the CPU emulation route. One of the things that's really cool about this is that uniquely to Barracuda is our advanced threat protection capability is across our entire portfolio. And Barracuda is a portfolio company. We're here talking now about email security. We also have next generation firewalls. We have web security gateways. We have web application firewalls, et cetera. We've got a whole range of products. And they all use this same ATP capability. So it's leveraging across the entire thing. Email security comes with our web security gateways, works with our next generation firewall, et cetera. All of our products feed into this. So we're looking at all the network vectors. We're looking at email. We're looking at web. We're looking at mobile users, tablets and cell phones. We're even looking at application layer. So if you've got applications that we're protecting, you're actually seeing if people are trying to upload files into them, or if your web gateway, people are trying to download files. And all of these things all feed in to enhance the machine learning. And the reason for this is machine learning is basically based on you take a bunch of good things and a bunch of bad things and you run them through and you get to identify common parameters. Common bad things look like this, good things look like that. And I can take an unknown file and I can say, hey, how much does this look like one or the other? Well, to keep the training accurate and make the training really effective, you need a broad range and a high volume. And that's something we can provide that most people really can't touch. So the other thing about this that's cool is we've got honeypots out there for people to try and attack. I'm sure many of you know what honeypots are. For those who don't, they're vulnerable systems that are out there specifically so an attacker can try and hack it. We have web crawlers looking for malicious websites. Shows 240,000 deployments. When we wrote this slide, that's what it was. It's about 300,000 now. We actually get customer submissions. People will say, hey, this file, I found this file, I think it's bad. What is it? Can you tell me something about it? And we can go from there. And then we got Barracuda Labs, a team in South San Jose, whose actual job in life is to look at this stuff, see what we're doing, see what's being done in the world as a whole, and add it to our systems. I've got a question here. I'm going to take a quick. Sarah's already got the question answered for me. Thank you, Sarah. So next step of the puzzle, backup. Microsoft's environment is such that I won't say it's impossible for you to ever lose a file to physical drive failures in a Microsoft environment if you're on Office 365 using OneDrive or SharePoint or Teams or any other things, but it's virtually impossible. Their infrastructure is about as rock solid as it gets. But there's still valid reasons to have offsite security, have things stored that are not stored in their environment. So what the offsite storage does is it gives you a layer of redundancy and security. One of the things that Microsoft doesn't necessarily handle that well is if somebody accidentally or actually maliciously deleted a file. Okay, or if a file got corrupted. You can get them to do it, but it can be a bit of a challenge to get them to recover files for you. Our user interface is super simple and easy to use. So if somebody calls you up and says, calls you up as the admin and says, hey, I need to get a file. I need this file back. I deleted it. I'm sorry. Please recover my file. And it's incredibly easy to go in and recover that file. You don't need to open it to go to Microsoft. You don't need to call them. You don't need to wait on the phone. You just make it happen. Very, very easy. You can restore it in place back into the cloud. You can restore it onto an arbitrary location. You want to drop it to thumb drive, drop it to a desktop. Easy to do. Very, very simple.
Let's get some visibility into it. Let's see what we can show you.
And the next step here is the cloud archiving service. I call it a final piece. In the email security in the essentials world, this is kind of the last piece of it. A lot of people don't consider archiving as part of security. But from an overarching business perspective, they actually can be a huge part of security for compliance issues. If you don't comply, you can actually face fines, you can face a whole bunch of other problems if litigation ever happens, or there's actually issues with being able to find data. If you've ever searched through your folders in Outlook, you know how difficult some of it can be to find. We actually offer a very sophisticated search capability. So we're adding an immutable journaled archive. And what that means is it keeps context. It keeps an entire flow of a conversation through email, which can be very, very useful. And it's immutable. It's kept off of the Microsoft architecture. So you don't have users who go, oh, I probably shouldn't have sent that email. I'm going to delete it, delete any trace. If you have an archiver in position, they can't do that. And good or bad from some people's perspective, but from purely legal perspective, it's very important to have these archives available from a business perspective. One of the things actually really cool about it is that it's very easy to search and very effective to search. If you actually are involved in litigation or something, you can actually do some very specific, you can save searches, you can do some very specific search parameters and find things. Or if you're just a user, right, you were communicating, as 18 months ago, your email queue has been deleted or has 100,000 emails in it. You want to look for some conversation you were having with a vendor that you worked with a year and a half ago. You remember who it was and you remember a couple keywords, but that's it. We have a very good advanced search function that lets you find those emails that you may have lost, may have deleted, may just not be able to find, and recover them, get them back. So it's a really cool functionality simply from just a pure functionality perspective. So the next thing I want to talk about here a little bit is Spearphishing and Barracuda Sentinel. This is a new product we released last year. It's a very powerful capability that most people really don't have. Spearphishing, if you're not familiar with it, is a very targeted form of attack. Regular spam is just, I'm going to get a list of 100,000 names, 1 million email addresses, however many, and I'm going to send them out. I'm going to send just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails out. Phishing is sometimes very similar, but is a little more targeted often, in that I'm going to get a list that only includes, a certain region, certain people. You can get targeted, really targeted, where I'm going to go after a particular business. But spearphishing is very specific. Spearphishing is, I want that one. I'm going after you in person. So I do some research on you and I'm going to make an attack against you. Or I'm going to impersonate someone in your organization, which is where a lot of the business email compromise comes from. And this is where Barracuda Sentinel comes into play. It's a very, very interesting set of capabilities. And it's not just about the spearphishing with Sentinel. I got a couple of things I can show you which are really cool as part of that. So one of the things it does that is unique is that we actually can look at the normal communication patterns within your organization. So spearphishing coming from outside is of a definite problem. But one of the problems we encounter most and has caused some of the greatest losses is what they call business email compromise, where someone in an organization is, an email comes in pretending, an email pretending to be from the CFO to the CFO or wherever it happens to be in your organization, if you're a smaller organization, to an administrator or somebody else, saying, hey, look, I'm at a conference. I've just cut a deal with this vendor we're going to start working with. Please cut me a check for $50,000. So give it to this account so we can take care of this thing I've just set up. And it's faked. And the FBI was saying last year it was about $5 billion in losses, not million, sorry. And that this year they're actually predicting the losses from this kind of attack to be up to the multi-billion dollars, like $9 to $10 billion range, almost double. So it analyzes your normal communications patterns. It's actually able to identify these spearphishing attacks and give you real-time warnings. It will literally, as it comes in, it looks like, oh, that's spearphishing. Move it off to a quarantine, send you an alert saying, hey, this email looks like a phishing attack. You may not want to respond to it. And if you have a security administrator, you can tell them. So it gives you a real-time warning. But that's not all this does within Sentinel. Sentinel includes a DMARC capability. And what DMARC does is DMARC leverages SPF and DKIM, which are existing email security things, to actually give you visibility into people who may be trying to usurp your brand, faking being you, pretending to be someone they're not. And yes, I am sorry about the background chatter. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm trying to move my mic here a little bit. As I mentioned at the beginning, unfortunately, I wasn't able to work from my usual sound booth, so I'm in a slightly chaotic environment here, unfortunately. I do apologize for that. What DMARC does is DMARC gives you the ability to not just set up parameters to say, hey, these are the things that are authorized to send for me, but to actually say, if you see someone pretending to be me, tell me about it, which is becoming a much more common thing. We're seeing more people using it, and we add that DMARC capability. And then finally, Sentinel adds some basic and effective user training and some spearphishing simulation. But I go a little bit deeper on that in a moment because we have PhishLine. PhishLine's a company we just acquired very, very recently. The acquisition went through late last year, and I just started getting involved earlier this month. And PhishLine takes the ability that Sentinel has, because Sentinel has some pretty cool capability with simulated spearphishing, etc. And it adds a much, much broader and deeper capability with user education, a huge range of targeted simulated spearphishing, including SMS, email. They even do voicemail, and you can do things like produce a thumb drive or a DVD or CD that actually is designed to be malware, fake malware on it, to see if somebody picked up a drive in the parking lot, stuck another drive. And then it has a full depth of advanced detailed analytics. I have a question here about DMARC. And can we place something like DMARCian? I believe we can. I actually would have to see the DMARCian, see feature for feature, but we do have full DMARC reporting capabilities So my tentative answer would be yes. I'm pretty sure we can. I'd have to see if DeMarkian includes anything we don't include to answer your question on that particular feature. So this capability is really on top of what we have with Sentinel, and both of these are kind of standalone. You can get Essentials, and then you could get Sentinel, and then you could get PhishLine capability as well. And you're welcome. So to sum it up, as we're starting to wind down a little bit here, Microsoft does offer some really compelling reasons to move your organization to 365. You know, they do a great job of being services, you know, business productivity as a service. They're really, really good at it. And they include some basic security capability. They include some advanced security capability if you want to pay a little bit extra, but it still may not be enough. Barracuda, we complete your security picture. We got a full suite of email security tools that flesh it all out. So we give you email security, including the advanced threat protection capability. We give you offsite backups to restore data in case of loss, which is something that Microsoft is a little bit difficult to deal with if you need to do backups of recovering data from them. We give you the Cloud Archiver, which they offer as they have an actual. They normally save and archive in place. They actually offer it as an option, but it's only on the E5 and is added cost. Ours includes it as part of Essentials and is a very useful tool to have for security compliance, for regulatory compliance. We have Barracuda Sentinel that thwarts spearphishing, adds the DMARC capability to help protect your brand, and adds some basic spearphishing training capabilities. And then the PhishLine capability that really takes that capability we have in Sentinel for training and just takes it to a whole nother level. It is a phenomenally capable training platform and attack simulations platform. I was going through with one of their senior engineers the other day, and she was showing me what it's capable of, and it was like, gonna go, wow, this is cool. So if you have a need for training, PhishLine really is an amazing stack. So here are some quick guide. Sarah can give you the link. I don't actually have the link in this deck. Give you the link to Barracuda MSP and what they can do for you. So we've got the email threat scanner. You can look at the demo and actually look at the demo and see what the UI looks like. And if you want to see a view of all of our products Essentials, and you can actually back up one and see PhishLine and Sentinel as well. That is all I have. I'm gonna be here for a few more minutes. I'm gonna let Sarah take over here, but I'm gonna kind of watch the background and see if there's any other questions come in. I want to thank everybody who stayed and listened, and any of the questions you had. I really appreciate it. And Sarah, back to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Great presentation. Loved all the new updates, especially with PhishLine and how MSPs can take advantage of PhishLine now to offer their SMBs to educate them to better suit themselves against ransomware and other threats. So the webinar has been recorded and will be sent out within 24 hours. So in case anyone missed any of the presentation, you can re-listen to it at your leisure. And if you have any questions, you can submit them in the questions panel to the right of the GoToWebinar screen here. And we'll give everyone just a few minutes here if you have any additional questions that Mike can answer of anything that he went over today.
So I had a question here about the threat scanner. Does the 365 account use has to be one with an email mailbox, or can the domain.com global administrator be used? So what it will use is it goes for authorization. I actually have a demo. If you look on our YouTube channel, I actually have a video on how this is used, and you can actually see a demo of how the threat scanner is used and what it can find. But you would use an account in the normally you'd use an account in the domain, but whatever one you would use to authorize it, when you go you're given the option of what account to authorize with, and whatever account you're authorizing will use those credentials. I don't have the link immediately available. Unfortunately, I don't have it memorized, and I'm not in a setup where I can jump it out. But if you go to YouTube and look up barracuda.com, or just look up Barracuda Networks on YouTube, and look for technical moments. Oh, I've got somebody who's posting it here for us. Thank you very much, Sarah, for posting that. But that will show you the video that I've done. There's a whole series of videos there. If you want to look at them, like them. It'll make me happy if I get likes. But I've got a whole series of videos. That's something we're actually doing, myself and other members of my team, that we're going to try to just flesh this out and give people a really good idea of what Barracuda is about. And we're going to have more technical ones as well that actually go into depth on kind of technical how-tos. But you can actually see that, and you can see that in action.
Good job. That's the bonus my wife gets.
I'm not going to try to actually speak that. You put the link up, and I'm not going to try to actually speak it out loud because trying to copy it as I type, lose everybody, I think.
Oh, no worries. I also posted it in the chat panel to the entire audience.
Cool.
So they can just click it on from there.
Excellent. And if you want to give feedback on those videos to me, I'm totally glad to hear more. If there's anything you'd like to see, let me know. Our own internal people use those as references and kind of give them out to customers. So we think we want it to be really useful and very informative.
So Mike, I think that's all the questions we have today.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting.
Thank you.
And I will be with you next time.
Have a great day, everyone.